Hello there. Right. I think let's get started. So thank you all for joining us, and I think it's fair to say today's session is really around looking at interoperability in RCS, as the title is quite clear. And really the session today is to dig into actually, well, what is the future of RCS? How is it going to pan out? Are there areas where actually we need to kind of perhaps consider that it's just not going to go in a certain direction, and maybe consider the ways that we deal with that, or are there still certain things that we can talk about? So today's questions really are going to give the panel an opportunity to dig into some of the harder questions behind RCS. Before we do that though, quick intros. So my name is Michael Power. I work with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum and also provide consultancy into the messaging industry. I love the things that we do with RCS and rich messaging channels, and I want them as a consumer. So I find quite a lot of motivation in trying to drive those things from this end of it as well. But that's enough about me. Should we start over on the far left? I'll start on Doug, if that's okay. Do you want to give us a quick intro?
Sure.
Who you are?
I'm Doug Makishima. I'm the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for Summit Tech. Summit is a leading provider of IMS and RCS solutions, both on the infrastructure side and the client side. We also have a very innovative VR 360 live streaming platform for even greater engagement than the messaging channel.
Thank you.
Oh, do we need a mic?
Silvia? Yeah, we will do for.
Good. Oh, for the okay. Well, I feel like Madonna now. Oh, you're filming that. I'm sorry. So anyway, Silvija Renusa from InfoBip. So I focus on product partnership with rich messaging. I worked with our partners Google, Apple, and Viber on the rich messages rollout.
Okay, very much.
This is Steve Zitnik, Chief Technical Officer of Interop Technologies. Interop is a platform provider for all messaging, all the way RCS, all the way down to kind of more legacy platforms in the SMS world.
Thank you.
I'm Alex Nourouzi, carrier sales for Europe.go, which is a Gupshup.
Ramy, do you want to?
Ramy, Riad, VP of Future Messaging at Cisco WebEx.
And Carlos Aragon, AVP of Product Marketing with Mavenir.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. So I think let's start with the first question then. I'm sort of thinking I'll probably go Steve. So what does the future look like for RCS at the moment, from where you're sat and what you see of the industry? We've seen Mobile Squared perhaps revise some of their numbers. We've seen a number of competitive forces changing how we consume RCS. What do you see from you and your organization?
I think the future is actually still bright. Let's put it that way. I think there have been challenges, and we've seen some lowering in some of the estimates of revenue streams over time. I think that also has a lot to do with just the pace at which we've been able to move. I started in the RCS world in 2007, along with some other folks. But it's been a slog. And I think the industry has morphed a little bit, certainly from where we thought we were going in 2007 to where we find ourselves in 2022. The original thought process around this was that it was going to be very much a carrier-focused service, very much an operator service. And that has changed. It's now, at least in the P2P landscape, certainly, very much a Google service. And, I think that has hindered us in a few ways, not the least of which is in, frankly, any hope of getting Apple participation. But I think in general, the ecosystem is growing. I'm excited and happy to see more and more of the operators begin the process of integrating MAP platforms, of beginning to move A2P traffic. And I think that'll do a lot. North America is certainly lagging pretty much the rest of the world. But with our current plans, we know that the North American operators should be up and operating and ready to receive traffic, right around the end of the year. So that's good news.
That is fantastic. Well, I suppose a question there is, I mean, you mentioned it was started as an operator, or
Yeah.
you saw it as an operator service, at least
Sure.
it was in the industry. How has that changed? Does that materially affect where we are today, or because
I think
you hear
it-
about operators involved?
Yeah, they are, and I'm certainly those who choose to do agreements with Google from an operator or a carrier base as opposed to a guest cloud or something along those lines. Have more of a say. I think one of the things where it's a help and a hindrance, right? Google's decisions on what to do with the actual messaging client, and when they made the decision that they weren't going to, integrate that with any, I shouldn't say any, with any but a few back-end systems, I think took a lot of the control out of the carrier's hands. In the A2P side of it, there's more, because we're all doing, map over Roma. We have a very similar solution to what our colleagues over at .go are launching today. So there is room in that ecosystem for the operator, but the P2P market is pretty much gone.
Got you. So that's yeah. Well, should we hand that over to this side? I mean, is there anyone who would like to tackle that same question on, what do you see as the future for RCS? Do you agree? Is it the same as what Steve was just saying there, or who wants to take that? Alex, Carlos? I might steal this one if that's okay, and stand in front because I'm conscious I'm stood in line with you. So I think it's a bit easier if I'm stood over here talking to you rather than
Turn it on. Okay. So I'm a huge sci-fi fan. So picture this. Sicily, wrong series. I'm at a situation right now when, in these sci-fi shows, when somebody makes a decision and then suddenly two timelines open. That's where we believe we're right there. So the future of RCS is going to depend on several actions that need to happen in the next 12 months. And that is, as Steve said, P2P is dead, okay? Get over it. It's dead. Move on. Focus on RCS business messaging. Focus on how you can enable an easy go-to-market as simple as possible. Start eating your own dog food. Start drinking your own champagne. Start running campaigns. I heard from a carrier today that they're not being allowed to run consumer campaigns yet. They're only doing like SMB campaigns because the corporation is still not in that mindset. That is wrong. Focus on running your own thing. But then the other thing is, as a carrier, you are in a situation where you need to decide what's your path to the future going to be. And we had the discussion this morning in another session. Your messaging P2P is gone. Again, get over it. Your voice is going to be gone pretty soon. Because I don't know about you guys, but out of my phone, if you look at my call logs, 90% of my call interactions are on Teams, FaceTime, WhatsApp voice. Actual voice calls, only my spam calls that go straight to voicemail. Because for most of those interactions, we're interacting with our tribes, and the tribes are in different locations. So if you take out of the three services that mobile operators traditionally offer, the SMS or the messaging, the voice, and the data plan, what's left is the data plan. And there is not much differentiation you can do in a data plan. Once you're in 5G, low latency, high bandwidth, what's your differentiation? Price. And that's a race to the bottom. So you're in a situation today where you can decide, do I want to invest in providing more value into the messaging ecosystem to help with partners like, Mavenir, InfoBip, IMI, we're all here to help them, to provide value to the company so that they don't have to start creating campaigns in multiple channels. We can give them an omni-channel platform that leverages the best of the mobile channel. And then, if you need to do WhatsApp, we'll also give you a connection to WhatsApp. You turn in traffic there, but focus on driving people to RBM if you can, because in the end, same people you're going to be reaching with WhatsApp, you're going to reach with RBM. But the thing is, a lot of them are still waiting. In like the old MNO traditional way of thinking is like, I'm going to wait until somebody makes it successful and then I'll follow. The problem is that's not going to happen. We saw what happened with P2P a while ago. RCS P2P wasn't happening. Google said, guys, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm making it over the top. I need it on Jive because Apple is eating my cheese in the US and I'm losing activations to iPhone because people want to use the blue bubble. If we don't deliver RBM fast enough, probably Google is also going to get tired and say, you know what, we're just going to do it. And we're just going to enable the companies to do it. So, and when that happens, there is no crying over the spilled milk. It's, again, it's done, get over it. But what's left is just the data plan. So at this point, this reality, that's where we need to make the choice. All of us here in this table are ready, but they need to start, believing the story and jumping on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Carlos, why don't you tell us what you really think?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I watched some, your presentations. I was on one of your panels, and it's like the optimism meter is like fully pegged to 11, right?
So,
and I can't tell, was that pessimistic or optimistic?
So I
can't tell. Sorry.
I believe on RBM.
Realistic.
I believe on RBM. But realistically, I've been working with MNOs for 25 years to know what to expect. And there is the leaders, very few, and there is the followers, the rest of them. A lot of them, even the ones that you think are the leaders, the first thing are going to tell you, show me the money. And for many of these use cases, it's still a nascent technology. We cannot show you the money. What we can show you is, hey, there is these use cases that show better engagement, better conversion, and companies are paying huge amount of money to Google for conversions and for engagement, orders of magnitude higher than SMS. Like people are used to paying $6, $7 to Google for a click in an advertisement. You can leverage that on RCS. Now, can we guarantee you the money? Not today, because there is not enough campaigns to show you the proof. But the potential is massive. We saw what Nick Lane presented yesterday. There is the same reach in the UK on TV that you have on RCS today. But on TV, you don't get any feedback. Like, you're throwing your ads in there, and then some people may buy, but there is no click, there is no follow through. Maybe you see an increase in sales, but you don't know if it's actually from the TV or because, somebody started, promoting your things in Instagram. Who knows? On RCS, you get all of these details. You know who clicked, who saw it, how long it took them, all of those things. Why are they not jumping in it? Because they don't even know they can. The carriers are not doing that education yet.
Well, let's hand over to. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize this
I'm
thing.
going to go this side this time. On that point,
I'm just going to comment on his comment.
Yeah.
So it's realistic, not pessimistic or optimistic, right? But it's interesting because the last 2 days, we're almost at the end of the second day here, right? I've been in a lot of these presentations, and it's like we're doing a victory lap. We're patting each other on the back, and there are all these launches going on, these campaigns, amazing results, and it's very good. It's very optimistic. I like it. But then why you mentioned Mobile Squared and Nick Lane? In 2025, he's projecting for all business messaging, RBM is only 1%, right? Why is that? And I think you guys have both addressed it to some extent. So what can we do to move that from 1% to 5, 10, 20%? Because to me, 1 billion users reachable, 25% in most regions, right? That's pretty good. And people talk about, Apple, iOS, and WhatsApp and interoperability, which hopefully we'll talk about on this panel as well. But those numbers, that's pretty solid. That's pretty good reach. So to me, I'm just struggling with why, there's some pessimism out there from some analysts or an analyst who is, the leading analyst in our space.
He's usually an optimistic guy, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I am also an optimist when it comes to RCS and rich messaging in general. When I started with InfoBip almost 6 years ago, we just launched Viber. So after that, we added WhatsApp and Apple Business Chat and Facebook Messenger. So really, we had a lot of experience on the rich messaging. When it came to RCS, our biggest challenge was awareness. So when we launched WhatsApp, everybody wanted it. Everybody knew what it was, what they can do with it. So the brands were drawn to it. The brands are not aware of the technology and what it can do for them. So our biggest efforts are to invest in awareness, talk about it until we're blue in the face, do case studies, do industry events, just show what they can do with this powerful, basically new channel to really expand on the pool of use cases. And when we have the conversations with the carriers, in our early conversation, they were afraid of cannibalization of SMS, which I personally don't believe it's going to happen.
Also,
because
from 20 years ago.
I'm talking about A2P here.
No, I know.
But for the P2P, like you said, the game is lost. But for the A2P, Rich messaging is expanding the pool of use cases. You can do within the messaging experience things that you couldn't do a couple of years back. You couldn't even think about it. And now with the WhatsApp and Vibers and all of these like rich conversational features, the brands have so many at their disposal to create really something immersive and something that will grab the user attention. With RCS, it's the fragmentation in the market, the commercial models, the stars need to align, and a lot of people are included in this party, let's call it like that, in order to make it a success. With WhatsApp and Viber, it's simpler because we have only one provider, WhatsApp or Viber. So, but yeah, definitely optimistic. You can quote me on
Before
that.
I pass it to you, if I may add one thing, when you say I disagree on this fragmentation thing, because the companies are spending campaigns on Instagram, TikTok, and places to reach 100,000 subscribers or 100,000 people through an influencer. So if you can bring them a good enough number, they'll take it. Even if it's just, imagine Spain, I can only reach the orange subscribers. If you give them 200,000 people they can reach, they'll take it.
Honestly, that's not my experience because we are doing omni-channel and we have markets where Viber is strong because everybody's using Viber. Where Viber has only a fragment of the market, it's not an established channel for business communication. Same with WhatsApp, same with RCS. Usually the brands are telling us, okay, we see it's great, let us know when you reach 20%.
Okay, but in that case, are you talking to brands that are doing A2P? Because yes, if you're going to be doing A2P and just throwing something and seeing if it sticks, you want the numbers. But if you're doing conversational commerce, you want the quality.
Nobody understands conversational commerce yet. So we are doing a lot on that front as well. We have a CX team here, trying to explain what it actually takes to create a high quality, engaging conversational experience. It is definitely the future, and we are investing a lot in professional services and tools in order to make it happen, to capitalize on the richness of all the OTTs, RCS included. But it's a long road.
Well, so. I think you've touched on a couple of points there. Well, I think the first one was Steve said, P2P is gone, and I think I think it's fair across the board. That's
trademark. P2P is gone. Get over it.
Get over it. Yeah, that's the final part of that statement. But A2P, then the kind of the next piece of this, where we see a lot of the value of RCS really now, we're saying that then arguably the operators need to be able to create the value chain themselves. So rather than again necessarily worrying too much, they buy the platforms in, and then ultimately they're selling into their customer base or to enterprises that come to them. So there's a bit of a change there, perhaps for the operator business model. How are you? I suppose the next challenge then that we see is in national reach. How does interoperability work with all of this? So you've mentioned there, I think, being able to reach Orange and for a brand, surely for them, until you can reach every operator at least. Okay, it may not be 100% of the country, it may not even be 50 or 60%, but at least if it's every operator. So I suppose that's the next sort of question I'd like to pose to the panel is, what is the current state of message interoperability, and how is that impacting the current rollout of RCS? Have you guys got a mic?
I think that's the problem on why aggregators exist. If you think of it, aggregators thrive on the complexity of the interoperability. And having multiple maps, multiple platforms within the same country or within multiple countries, that's why aggregators are there. And I think that's where we remove the complexity from the enterprise level, that they're sending the message to one destination. And that destination, the same complexity, if you think of it, exists today for SMS. You can't wake up in the morning and say, I'm a brand, I want an SMPP bind to a carrier. You're not going to get it. Yep. And you're not one, you're talking about multiple carriers, multiple endpoints and all that. You're not going to get, you're going to go to an aggregator. And even if you think of WhatsApp, they don't deal directly with the enterprise. You go through a service provider. Same thing with Facebook. You go through a service provider. Apple is the same thing. You have a list of service providers to pick from. So that common, that notion of having a service or an aggregator in the middle is not a foreign territory for brands to work with to launch a service.
Do you think, I mean, I'm going to pass over to Alex here. Well, actually, Alex, make your comment.
Yeah, maybe just a quick comment on that. I totally understand that, but I think the reality is today we only have a handful of aggregators engaging on RCS today. Yeah, so we might have maybe 30 SMS aggregators in most markets, but we only have 2 or 3 here. Yeah, the ones in the room today who are really engaging on RCS. So the question is, it's not the long tail. Number 4 in the market all the way through to number 30. Where are they on RCS? Yeah, and it's at the moment. Of course, they play that role of, managing the fragmentation and stuff like that. But at the moment, it's just too complex, I think. With WhatsApp, it's a simple portal, regardless of each operator. For us, we're doing 3 or 4 different systems, be it Vodafone, Mavenir, Google, Orange, whatever it might be. The onboarding whole process it's just too complex for the smaller aggregators. And at the moment, they just don't see the opportunity.
But Alex, just to comment on that. Sorry, even the smaller aggregators, if you think of it today, just count the number of tier 1 aggregators in every market. They're probably the same 4 or 5.
Yeah.
In every market that have a direct connection to the carriers, the rest are cascading through each other. So I think the reason there are 4 or 5 is because the 4 or 5 aggregators are some of the biggest players in the markets, right? That we're all operating in. We just took first movers advantage to connect with RCS, and most of us got some of their bigger brands to adopt the channel. Right, it's convincing the rest of the enterprises to take that leap with reach at 25%, 10%, whatever that is, and I think there needs to be a lot more education in the market for the enterprise. Why RCS? Why is it better? Why should I move? Why should I convert? And also, if you think of it, the other problem is that when you talk to an SMS team on a brand side, it's pretty plain and simple. It's 160 characters. Right now, when you involve, and then we faced that problem when we first launched RCS. Well, I need your logo. Wait, you need to talk to a different department because now you're talking about colors, logos, pictures. There's brand guidelines you need to follow. So suddenly, we're talking to a different team, and now the brand needs to spin up resources to create these assets that are going to go into the conversation. So it's no longer 160 characters.
I suppose, I mean, that again comes back to that industry education piece. And I mean, at the minute, what activity is actually going on in that space? Are we reaching out as an industry to the right places? We've had a number of these events. We have MWC, but I think most of you would recognize the enterprise and brands aren't certainly not there in the numbers that would need for education. So what are the routes that we need to take this? How do we move this into the enterprise space? Make them aware.
I'm going to take this one because if people in the MEF know me for something is when I die in my tombstone, it's going to say education, 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 because that's what I've been evangelizing about RCS from the beginning. We need to educate all the entire value chain, but there's so much we can do as vendors or aggregators to educate, because in the end, the customer gets most of his education from their main business vendor. Like when you go to buy a bike, your education about the bike is from the guy at Decathlon or whatever store you're buying the bike from. You don't go and kind of ask, the wholesaler of the bike. Yeah, sometimes you can go to the vendor's website, but there is so much you can get from the bike. If you really want to get like real experience, performance of the bike, that kind of information is not on the website. It's the guy who's using the bike. Well, same thing with RCS. I had a discussion with a carrier this morning. I'm not going to say who they are because it's not a good thing for somebody to tell this. But the discussion was they're not planning RCS because they're not seeing pressure from the aggregators asking for the channel. But then the aggregator's answer is, well, we're not pressuring for the channel because we don't have information of your intent to launch. We don't have the pricing information. I don't want to put this in the head of my customers. And then they come to me and say, I want to do it. And I say, well, wait, they're not ready. So I'd rather just keep them on SMS. They're happy. So there is a little chicken and egg in there, a little vicious circle. And I think the only one who can kind of resolve it right there would be the carrier to actually take this serious position of, you know what, we're going to either say we're going to do it or say, you know what, we're not going to do it. And then let the aggregators figure out, okay, then we're just going to invest on WhatsApp or something else. But all of this story about, yeah, we're waiting for the aggregators to push and the aggregators say, no, we're waiting for the carrier actually to commit. That's what's dragging things around. And again, that goes back to the education. They need to be the ones, we can help them, but they need to be the ones launching their own campaigns, like Bouygues has been doing, like Orange has been doing, showing the customers what the experience is, and then showing them the benefits. Like we launched this campaign, we sold, I don't know, 20% more Samsung Galaxy S22. It was the best performing campaign ever.
Well, I mean, I suppose one thing we should do is look at the positives on this, which is, I think, even through our activity in the MEF, we know there's a lot of the regions now are starting to get to a point where all of the operators would say they're launched. So I think we've got, 34% in Spain, similar kind of, I think it was 36 in Germany, but, out of a maximum of 60% Android users. So you could argue it's a higher percentage than that, it's only national. So it I don't know. I suppose that there is some good news in all of this. It seems that these countries are moving, but Doug, I can see.
Just to add on to what Carlos was saying, education. You talk about educating the operators, but I think we also need to educate the enterprises, right? I mean,
I'm saying the enterprises. The operators, we've been doing it for 4 years now. We've been doing GSMA, messaging labs, MEF, blah, blah, blah.
So then how do we educate the enterprises? Because this is going to sound like a commercial for Nick Lane and Mobile Squared, but one of the other slides in his presentation was 300 million registered businesses in the world, and only 5% are taking advantage of A2P SMS or any kind of messaging, right? So on the one hand, it's a huge opportunity. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's a really small sliver today. And that's, again, the funny thing is people worrying about cannibalizing SMS. Well, not much of that going on.
Let's put another way. How many advertisements have you seen from, T-Mobile advertising their SMS channel for businesses? I'll answer. 0. Nothing. BT, Telefonica, no. I mean, if you go to the website, some of them, mostly in Europe, have something about it, but the rest of them, they're not really doing that education. They normally go to the brands they know, the large banks, large corporations, in Spain, Telefonica, Banco Santander, BBVA, whatever, the big energy companies, the big fish. But they don't really do an advertising because they rely on the aggregators to bring all of those other brands.
Right.
So there is 2 avenues to educate the enterprises. There is one, either the MNOs that want to be a player and not just a pipe provider actually evolve to do that, and they start investing marketing money on doing this, or they empower somehow the kind of trusted aggregators like InfoBip, IMI, whoever, .go, to do that for them and kind of select them as trusted partners in their market, like they do when they promote, let's say, Cisco WebEx, or they promote the Ring Central as they're doing for things like Unified Communications. Just put them out there in your website saying, this is our trusted partner, and then you can go to them for information about the channel. But do the homework first. Have your business models ready, your pricing based on whatever, messages, sessions, whatever, ready, so that when the aggregator goes and talks to the customer, they can already know how much it's going to cost them to launch a campaign.
I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. So we did have there's a point around DMA now, and I appreciate we've just said P2P as far as the operators goes is largely dead, but is the digital message, this is just the name was completely just escaped.
Digital Market Act.
Sorry?
Digital Market Act.
Digital Market Act. Thank you. Yeah. Brain absolutely just disappeared on me there. I do apologize. But does that have an impact on what we've just been talking about? Does that change the story? Bringing the ability to have messages travel into Apple, and does it make RCS better or not? Or I'm going to hand that to.
Does anybody want to answer? I don't want to monopolize this thing.
I'm going to hand that one to Doug, perhaps, on how the. Yeah, there you go. So
P2P is dead. Long live P2P, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it is a valid question. I mean, we've been spending a lot of time on the panel talking about RBM, but this is RCS World, so it's also we're talking about P2P. In terms of interoperability, of course, Google has rolled out Android messages with RCS native, and that opens up a big question about what about secondary devices, IoT devices. So there's an interoperability question there. Within the RCS world, but then you think about RCS, iMessages, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp. Is there a case for cross-messaging platform interoperability? And I know there's a lot of pessimism around DMA, whether it will actually pass, and if it does, how long it will take. But imagine if it does. What are the implications not only for P2P but for RBM as well? Sorry, that wasn't an answer. It was a question.
It was, you kind of rephrased it, but I'll take that. Feel free to answer it as well if you
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I-
but
Pass.
I don't foresee a future where A to P is necessarily part of that. I mean, I think it's more focused at the consumer level, at the P2P level, things along those lines. I think it will create an immense amount of complexity. I'm not opposed to that personally, because generally that means one of us here will stick a platform in the middle and make it all work, right? But I think it's an interesting approach, because I think the bigger problem is not so much interoperability, but it's we've got this concept now where we've got an unregulated entity, which is Google, right? And we've got regulated entities, which are the operators, essentially selling the front end of that to Google, right? And it's really a mismatch, to tell you the truth, which is why we're all promoting map platforms and being able to control and fine tune and all that kind of good stuff. But I think, to me, the DMA is like half a solution. Because really what the regulators, and obviously my opinion, should be looking at is that, Google with RCS or Apple with iMessage or Facebook or WhatsApp, these are communication service providers. They don't own spectrum or towers, but they are providing, services. I think, Carlos, you were saying all of your voice calls now are, the majority. It's Teams, it's, and so there's a whole host of things around that the operators are saddled with, that these other CSPs or internet providers are not. And, you bring up things like lawful intercept. In the States, we have the Universal Services Fund where, we use money that's paid ostensibly by Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile to fund broadband in rural areas and things along those lines. The playing field is just totally unlevel in this case. And what that's causing is essentially for the operators to get their lunch handed to them, first with messaging, soon with voice. So it's an interesting thing, but I think it's not necessarily a bad idea, but it would be incredibly hard to implement, just from a technical standpoint. But then, I don't think it would happen without a huge fight, a huge fight.
So, I mean, I suppose one angle to that then is, does that reopen the door to the P2P opportunity? And like I said, it creates an opportunity to create platforms in between or aggregation layers, or is that it's just too different to really be part of this?
Well, I think what it creates is perhaps a need for an interoperability platform, for more of a hubbing service, right, between Facebook and RCS and WhatsApp. And there are a number of us here who would be competing for that business. So that's great. As far as opening the door to P2P, no, I think that door's closed. I mean, you could offer a new service, certainly. Yeah. You could come up with Steve's messaging service or something like that, which would be SMS. At any rate, but that's just a whole other layer, right? Yeah. So where we find ourselves these days, at least in the P2P world, as far as I'm concerned anyway, is you have Facebook, you have Google, you have Apple. And and then, Viber and WhatsApp and things like that as well. But that's P2P messaging.
So, I mean, with the three you mentioned there, are the differences between those channels, and maybe I'll open this up to someone else on the panel, but are the differences between those channels, are they similar enough that actually we can aggregate between the three? Is omni-channel the future of this for our business, for our industry? Or actually, are the channels, do they operate too differently to be able to easily have a campaign that runs on RCS today and Apple tomorrow and Facebook another day? Do they align close enough? Probably.
Yeah, maybe Silvija? I can jump on that one. I mean, yeah, we have various OTCs out there, but there are subtle nuances in the way they operate. Not only feature-wise, what kind of rich content you can share, but for example, the best difference is who is initiating the communication. Is it the brand or the user? For example, Viber, when it started, the proposition was pretty simple. You can send rich content directly to your users inside Viber app. You use the mobile phone number to send those messages. You have read receipts, verified branded sender. The users can reply two-way communication, so it was pretty clear. When Facebook Messenger then launched the same a few months later, everybody was confused because they expected the same, mobile phone number, messages going directly in your Facebook Messenger inbox. And I would say the community was kind of disappointed because the model was completely different. The user needed to initiate the communication first, and the use case that they were catering was customer support. WhatsApp did a hybrid model, for example. You were able to send notifications and customer support, sending messages to a mobile phone number, but there was no promotional content allowed. Now they're kind of branching into that space. With Apple, again, only customer support use cases. So when you pick and choose geographies where certain OTTs are popular and you pick and choose the features of the certain OTT, you can then find the best channel for your customer.
So does that also mean then that when we look at, perhaps having the concept of having RCS being supported or RBM even better supported in iOS, is that going to be one of the reasons why they perhaps, other than all of the other Apple reasons for it, but is there would they even want to support the use cases that RCS brings?
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. It will benefit RCS as well, because at this point, there's no true P2A discovery on RCS. There are no chatbot directories, deep links, QR codes that can kind of bring the user inside the RCS experience. And that is kind of making us hold back on all the variety of conversational use cases, primarily customer support, which are going really, really well on other channels like WhatsApp and Apple Messages for Business.
Correction, there is no P2A discovery in Google RCS. It's part of the specs. They just didn't implement it on Android
I'm
Messenger.
saying how it is right now,
Sorry,
not
Google,
how
you're
it
our
should
host
be.
here, but to each their own. They screwed up there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, but
Or they
it's
protected
not
their web
supported,
search
so
business.
right
Yeah.
now we cannot do anything about it.
Which Ramy, they protected the rent, which drives me to the other thing. P2P is dead, move over. The next thing is Apple is not deploying RCS, get over it. It's not happening.
no, particularly
There's nothing
not,
for them.
Yeah.
There's no benefit for them. Why would they do it? If they ever get forced by a regulator, they're going to do it as a backup protocol like they do with SMS, and they're still going to force a
Yeah,
message because that's what they want.
we lost the shot to have Apple come into this at all at the point that Google just took it over. Once it became an absolute Google property, there's not a chance that Apple's ever going to support it. And they have other options as far as, in 5G using IP and SMSF and all that other stuff for their fallback. So that's the road they'll go.
Okay, so we've got P2P is dead, get over it. We've got Apple being on board is dead, get over it. So we're left with A2P. We're narrowing the field down here. So let's talk about purely Google then. And we started talking there about discovery, chatbot discovery, and it'd be great to have something maybe within the messaging app that wasn't implemented but should have been, or perhaps. But me as a consumer, I kind of want to be able to go into Google Maps or Google search engine and search for a brand.
And you can.
And I get a brand,
Yeah.
but I'm not getting an RCS
No, you're getting
chat. Is that
business,
that's right?
Google
right?
business
Google
messaging.
business messaging.
How does that impact what we do and how all of this works? Who?
I think you're asking the question to the wrong people.
Yeah.
They're outside.
Yeah. Just go
We're
out
trying to
there.
bring.
Why?
I personally think it's a huge danger to RCS and the A2P aspect of it. It's you just go click on the little dot and the button. You're in business messaging. The technical leap from doing that to putting it right into the messaging app is like zero.
Mhm.
And when and if that does happen, then it's going to have a huge impact on the A2P side of it, because Google will just own that too.
But so I'll take the other side of that as well.
Okay.
I'm not Google, so I'm not gonna. But the one thing I know is that with business messages, they've overcome a big issue that RCS has, which is reach.
Oh, yeah.
It's because it is reliant on maps, and any device, iOS or Android, that has maps has business messages. So that was a huge success for business messages. Now, can it be married with RCS for the devices that are capable? That's probably, and I'm assuming that's probably a roadmap item that's going to come anyway.
Yeah.
That's a natural progression for both services to be combined together. So I don't doubt that we're going to see something like that in the future, but, and I'm not defending, but also I see the vantage point that they took with business messages is now they have a service of a business messaging function running on iOS devices. So I'm looking at it from a different angle. They had to tackle the problem on both Android and iOS to get out of the deadlock of this is only a Google service running on Android.
Sure. I mean, and I don't doubt their reasons for doing it. I certainly, if I were Google, I would do it.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm just questioning the ramifications thereof to RCS in a map.
I think of RCS, even though the Jive backend is operated by Google, but I still think of RCS, it is an operator service. In most markets that have launched RCS, where carriers said we are going to do it, the service has been transferred to operators.
Yeah.
And all of the aggregators have been treating RCS as an operator service. Whether it's through the RBM map or through the operator provided map, we're treating it with the same rules and regulations as an SMS operated service.
The aggregator is signing up with the operator.
Right, and when an operator comes online, we're happily signing these contracts with the operators. But I think it's the progression of moving from an over-the-top service to an operator service that's taking a little bit of time, because operators move a little bit slower than we would all like, right? The OTTs are moving a lot faster, and I think that's what Google's trying to introduce to the mix, is that speed of development into the market, that now that they have the client and the backend, sorry, Mavenir, but they're able to move a little bit faster. Because in the past, if you think of it as a carrier-owned backend, the backend would develop a feature or not develop a feature, the client will have it, and they're both pointing at each other. Well, the client didn't do it the way we want it. Well, the backend didn't do it the way we want it. Now, if you're controlling both sides of the equation, the rollout is a lot faster and cheaper than going to a Mavenir or to a WIT or to whoever the backend provider is, saying, roll out the next version of our platform. I'll take that apart, but from a spec perspective, if you think of it, and we've been involved in this spec, what's out there today is satisfying 90+% of any request coming in from an enterprise, right? There's no lack of feature that's saying, well, I'm enterprise X, I'm not doing RCS because it doesn't have, I don't know, integrated payments.
But the point I was trying to make is that before, when we were still running RCS cores for our customers, we used to do those interoperability testing with the client vendors.
But that problem is solved now.
I know
Well,
it's
the problem
gone.
is solved. If you own everything, the problem is
It's
solved.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, if
Can't argue with
it
that.
should be easier for the carriers because they no longer have to do homologations, certifications, and they're still not running.
But
They're still
if you
crawling.
think of it, they're crawling in the markets that they haven't made the decision, and there is a solution. So I look at the US, for example. All the operators are still trying to figure out what they're going to do, right? Verizon launched, I think, something, but the rest of the operators are moving slow. CCMI put things a couple of years back, but we're still running RCS campaigns for 4 years now. And we're running it on Google Guest with the knowledge of all the operators. And they're delivering great results for brands. We're at 10% market penetration. It's still, it's not a great number. It's not like some of the, but I'm saying that's not the brands want to see more reach. They don't care if the service is on Google's backend, or they actually they don't see the difference between a Google backend or a carrier backend. All they see is this is an SMS-like service that is running I just need to see more handsets.
Well, let's change that to the topic then. So one of the you've made a great point there, which brands want to see reach, but we saw some interesting slides from Nick and some data yesterday around comparable channels, maybe not comparable, but certainly other channels and the volumes that they have. We also saw some charts. So for those who weren't here, the examples were things like television, radio, printed media, and the actual numbers of them were considerably lower than perhaps some of the reach that you can get with RCS in the countries that have launched it already. Clearly, there are different rules and regulations, and there's so many variables that perhaps it's hard to make a definite comparison. But when you then also combine that with some of his other data, which and I think we would probably most have seen this, anyone who's run an RCS campaign, which is actually the response rate to it and the effectiveness, that even if you're only sending to a quarter of the number of people, you can actually be getting more revenue, more of the desired behavior off the end of it. So is part of it the reach, or is part of it, again, coming back to education and us changing the narrative on this to highlight, actually, it is super effective. Look at these other channels, it's more effective than.
I actually think it's both. It's the education and the reach, right? The education that there is reach in your market. There's 20, 30, whatever percentage there. That's an education by itself. You need to educate the brands that there is reach, right? It's slowly growing. In some markets, it's explosively growing.
Yes.
But it's there, right? Start. We need to make it simpler for enterprises to start using the service. Do we offer a simple upgrade your SMS to put a logo on it, right? I think every aggregator now is doing that. But is it something that you just do to introduce the concept into the market, like seed the market, get them all to register a RCS ID, get them out there, start converting an SMS to an RCS? Carriers, I think globally, are now recognizing that this use case is going to get charged the same price as SMS. So there's no risk factor for an enterprise to try out a solution like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the penny's dropped in that sense, in the seeding the base, moving some of these basic SMSs to RCS, getting those read receipts, getting brands to understand, actually there's some benefits here. And I think operators are starting to see, well, actually, we have to price that similar, RCS for that basic message as SMS. I think that's starting the penny to drop, and that will help. But I think the reach at over 30% in a lot of these markets in Europe is good. We have solutions for non-RCS devices as well, so I think we're getting there. But I think eating your dog food, drinking your champagne, absolutely critical. Use case number one for all operators. Yeah, I think when I was at the MEF, over 90% of the traffic is internal direct marketing campaigns. So that's the way it's got to be. So the education. Fully agree.
Great stuff.
Yeah, upgrading SMS with RCS is definitely a nice stepping stone.
Yes,
but we are all investing in it right now, heavily invested on the resources, because at the end of the day, we need to do all this extra work. But I mean, the GP is the same. So we are doing it out of the belief that it will kind of help with the awareness, with the adoption of RCS, that would unlock all these new use cases that we can do and want to do with our brands on RCS. So it's kind of investment in the future.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment and go back to the discussion about Google Business Messages. And Steve, you mentioned, it's a threat. I believe it's a threat to RCS, but it's an opportunity for business messaging, right? It's not RCS. They might merge it. It might move from the Maps app to Android Messages at some point. Who knows what the back end is? And maybe it's based on RCS. Maybe it's some XMPP, something else, right? So they have, Hangouts became chat, right? Google Chat. And then you have Android Messages, which is SMS, RCS. And then you have this thing that's today embedded in Maps. But I learned recently with a URL or on a website, you can also access that third form of chat. But the advantage that Maps has is that I mentioned earlier, Nick's statistic of 300 million registered businesses, only 5% of them are using SMS A2P today. But almost all of them are on Maps, whether they know it or not. And that's the brilliant thing about Google Maps. And then the other point is that Maps in iOS, or 60% of iOS users use Google Maps. So in terms of onboarding, it's there, it's automatic. It just appears in your Google My Business profile. There's the call button, and now there's this chat button. So it's brilliant. But is that really a competitive threat? I'm not sure, because they still need aggregators. They still need chatbots. They still need, in fact, if you go to the Google Messages page, there's a list of partners and who's on there. LivePerson, Twilio, so to me, it's all about, I know this is RCS World, but how do we get brands, enterprises, and operators to push forward with business messaging in general? Of course, we'd all love it to be in Android messages and in iMessages and completely, interoperable. But, as Carlos loves to say here, get over it, right? So we have to deal with what we have.
And one thing to add, I think every enterprise is aware of where their customers are and what they're using. A lot of brands now have that awareness. They know if their customers, the majority of them are iOS or Android. They know if they're WhatsApp or SMS. They know if they're Instagram or Facebook Messenger. So they know that. And I think it's you have to meet your customers where they are. It's not just one channel or the other. It has to be probably a lot of channels. It's a multi-channel approach rather than the days, I think, of I'm a brand and I only talk on SMS or RCS. That's gone. Get over it. And I think that a lot of brands are now understanding that and their strategies. And that's where the term omni-channel, because they want the same message delivered on multiple channels because it's the voice of the brand and so on. So we're seeing that mindset there within the brand. Now RCS is just another channel in the mix.
Thank you. Well, I'm very conscious we're near the end of the session. So perhaps are there any questions from anyone? We've got enough time for one question, perhaps, if anyone has any questions on what you've heard today. With so many of you, I'm conscious that we may not get too many questions. Go on then.
I think it wouldn't be kind of a question. It would be kind of a comment about the education angle that everyone's talking about the education. And for some reason, the education is supposed to be, this concern of education of enterprise clients and operators, et cetera. But the education goes both ways. And the thing is, like I was a month ago, I was at the anti-fraud conference of all the places. And the major American bank is losing $30 million a year because there are people that are generating the SMSs that are being delivered to the unsuspecting customers of this bank. This is a major bank, like hundreds of billions of dollars. And the thing is, what they actually operate is an unsecured channel to be delivering their information that is very sensitive, et cetera, et cetera. They use SMS. So anyone that could, access a service by this company or bandwidth has like an allowance of 5 SMS, and this is how fraudsters do it. So the angle of fraud is kind of being overlooked right now by RCS, and this is one of the things that I would like to kind of throw in as well. There's like a $30 million loss for one particular business in one country that RCS can actually cover, and this is, I think that there are many holes like this that we're yet to discover, that we're yet to explore and just understand what kind of value over what we already know can RCS provide. So.
I think, you touched on a great point there around brand verification, something we've not really talked too much about today. It's been in a number of sessions, though, over the last 24 hours, but certainly brand verification, perhaps that's another great angle for us to educate brands on, is not just around all the great features, but some of that side of it. Right, we are near the end. Do you want to give us a final kind of statement on the future of RCS from each of you, from our panelists? Pass you the mic, Doug. You can give us a closing statement from each of you. Okay.
Well, sorry, Carlos, I'm not over it, but I really believe there's a bright future. That's okay. You'll get over it. Huge opportunity, right? Going from 5% up, it's easily to double from small numbers, right? But the opportunity exists definitely, and I'm looking forward to RCS, moving from 25% penetration to 50% and beyond. I am concerned about things like DMA and the penetration of iMessages, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, but okay, I guess I'll have to get over that. On the RBM side, I think this Google Business Messaging is a threat, but it's also an opportunity. And how Google decides with their roadmap what to do with that technology, who knows? But at the end of the day, it's still an opportunity for business messaging.
Yeah, one more optimistic statement from me. Really, RCS, in my point, is a way for the carriers to capitalize on the growing popularities of the rich messaging that was introduced several years ago by Vibers and WhatsApp and others. So the opportunity is there. We know that it works. We have successful case studies. The brands are interested. But yeah, we still need to go a long way to make it an established channel for business communication.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think from my own perspective that RCS will grow. It will be a success. I think it will be a channel, not the channel. I think a few years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have thought that it would be the channel, like SMS is the channel. So there's growth there. We're moving along the path. But the ecosystem is, we simply have to know that it's going to exist with number of players. And that's just the way it is. Get over it.
Well, surprise, surprise, I'm an optimist as well. I think anybody
On this channel, on this panel, has got to be optimistic because we've been waiting. Now is the time. We've seen those use cases. We've seen those compelling results. We got the reach. We were over 30% in a lot of markets. Let's go out there. I think it's otherwise we're going to have other actors of moving in and are going to steal our pie. I'm personally for Google Business Messaging. I think we need a story around discovery somewhere, and actually that might crack the kind of education issue. Yeah. If it's all about A2P and, actually we need a discovery story. So if it's linked into Google Business Messaging, that might be interesting.
Just keeping it simple, keep educating the brands. That's all we need to do.
Brilliant, thank you.
And I'm going to finish this by saying that even if my wife had maybe said that I'm pessimistic, I'm not. I'm actually very optimistic about RCS. I agree with Steve. I don't think it's going to be the channel. It's going to be one channel. More important, less important. The Google Business Messaging has a purpose that from Google's point of view right now, they focus P2A on Google Business Messaging, A2P on RCS. But if I want to put it in a way, RCS is like a train, okay? It has a scheduled departure. Google has set that departure. They just didn't tell us when. And as operators, they can choose to be on the train when it leaves or outside of the train. That's entirely their choice. But the departure time keeps getting closer and closer. So RCS is happening. I'm sure of that. Now, who's going to be on the train when it happens? That's entirely up to certain people. And some markets will maybe left behind, and Viber or others will, or WhatsApp will take the ownership of that market from a marketing point of view. In some others, RCS might be the leading channel. In some others, maybe Apple Messages for Business. Who knows?
Well, thank you ever so much. Entertaining talking to all of you as ever. Great fun, and thank you for being a great panel. And thank you everyone that's listened here and remotely. Thank you.